The crimson hues of the Sanctum Sanctorum's evening light usually offered a contemplative solace, but tonight, they merely cast a deeper shadow on the Sorcerer Supreme's weariness. Dr. Stephen Strange, once a man whose hands held scalpel with godlike precision, now wielded the very fabric of reality with an ease that bordered on the monotonous. He had gazed into the cosmic abyss, bargained with entities whose names alone could unravel lesser minds, and punched gods in the face more times than he cared to count. Yet, the persistent hum of the universal constant now felt like a lullaby of the mundane. Another planetary alignment saved. Another interdimensional parasite banished. Another eldritch horror gently tucked back into its eldritch bed, Strange muttered, swirling a cup of tea that tasted suspiciously like lukewarm regret. The cloak of levitation, draped over a nearby armchair, offered a sympathetic rustle, as if to say, "Don't look at me, master, I just fly." His ennui was a palpable thing, a heavy shroud that dulled even the most spectacular displays of mystic power. The constant vigilance, the endless permutations of cosmic threats, he'd mastered them all. What was left? A restless hunger for a challenge, something that didn't feel like a recycled villain of the week episode. That's what had led him to this. A peculiar energy signature, faint yet utterly unique, had been pinging on his experimental dimensional scanner for weeks. It wasn't a threat, not overtly, but an anomaly, a resonance unlike any he'd ever catalogued. It hummed with a raw, almost unrefined magical potential. Perhaps it was a trick. Perhaps it was nothing. But for Strange, it was a distraction from the crushing weight of his own mastery. Very well, he sighed, adjusting the complex array of crystals and enchanted filaments that comprised his personal resonance amplifier. Let's see what archaic secrets you hold, little anomaly. Perhaps a new dimension requires a new brand of cosmic intervention, or perhaps, just a fresh cup of tea. He activated the array. The air around him crackled, not with the familiar gold of eldritch energy, but with shimmering, iridescent blues and purples. The scanner whirred, building to a crescendo, its delicate needles quivering with impossible readings. Strange felt a tug, a gentle, inquisitive probe at first, then a sharp, violent wrench. He hadn't intended for a direct pull, merely a scan, but the resonance had latched onto his own considerable magical signature, seeing a kindred, if immensely more powerful, spirit. Wong, perhaps you were right about fiddling with unknown dimensional frequencies on an empty stomach. Strange quipped, but the words were swallowed by the escalating scream of the machine and the sudden, disorienting sensation of being stretched thin across time and space. Reality fractured, spiraling into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and shapes. Then, just as abruptly, it snapped back. He hit the ground with a bone-jarring impact, the air knocked from his lungs. For a Sorcerer Supreme, it was an undignified arrival. The smell of soot, damp earth, and something acrid, like burnt sugar and ozone, filled his nostrils. He pushed himself up, his head swimming, the cloak of levitation flapping protectively around him, already scanning the immediate vicinity. He was no longer in the sanctum. Above him, a bruised, twilight sky glowered, heavy with rain that hadn't quite fallen. Around him, the familiar architecture of London was warped, almost caricatured by a strange sense of disquiet. Shop fronts were boarded up, their windows shattered. Graffiti, not of the usual kind but crude, dark symbols, defaced ancient brickwork. A distant boom echoed, followed by a flash of emerald light that painted the street in an eerie glow. Well, this isn't the Hamptons, Strange muttered, dusting off his robes. His experimental scan had clearly gone sideways. Before he could process the full extent of his unintended relocation, a blood-curdling scream tore through the urban twilight. Around the corner of a darkened alleyway, 3 figures, cloaked and masked, were terrorizing a group of cowering civilians. One of them, a gaunt, snake-like individual, raised a gnarled wand, a malevolent grin visible even through the slit of his mask. Crucio. A jolt of raw agony, not from him, but from the victim, reverberated through the air. Strange's brows furrowed. This wasn't the brute force magic of other dimensions, nor the intricate, precise energies he commanded. It was crude. Primitive, yes, but steeped in an unsettling emotional malice. He stepped out of the shadows. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "While I appreciate the theatricality, I find senseless cruelty rather tedious. Especially before my morning, or whatever time it is, coffee. The cloaked figures, Death Eaters by the look of their masks, froze. They turned, wands pointed. Their initial surprise morphed into disdain. Well, well, sneered the snake-like one, his voice a sibilant whisper. Look what the cat dragged in. A muggle playing dress-up? Strange suppressed a sigh. A muggle, you say? How quaint. You assume much, little man in the silly mask. He flexed his fingers, a faint shimmer of golden energy sparking between them. Now, I suggest you cease your torment and vacate the premises, unless you wish to experience the consequences of my rather extensive magical repertoire. One of the Death Eaters, larger and more brutish, laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Fool. We are the Death Eaters. You face the servants of the Dark Lord. He raised his wand. Avada Kedavra. A jet of searing green light hurtled towards Strange. His eyes narrowed. This wasn't a spell he'd encountered, but its intent was crystal clear. Instant, absolute annihilation. He merely extended his palm, and a shimmering, golden shield of pure eldritch energy materialized before him, absorbing the killing curse with a soft thrum. The green light dissipated harmlessly. The Death Eaters gasped. Their confidence visibly wavered. Impressive parlor trick, Strange conceded, a corner of his lip twitching. But ultimately futile. Now, my turn. He flicked his wrist, and a whip of crackling gold energy lashed out, coiling around the wands of two of the Death Eaters, yanking them clean from their grasp and sending them clattering across the cobblestones. The snake-like one recovered quicker, his fear turning to rage. What sorcery is this? Imperio. Strange felt a mental tendril brush against his consciousness, a probing, insidious attempt to control. He merely blinked. The cloak of levitation, sensing the violation, flared around him, and Strange swatted the mental intrusion away like an annoying fly. Amateur, he scoffed. Please, try a real challenge. He spun, conjuring a fiery portal behind the remaining Death Eater, then another in front of him. With a dismissive gesture, he shunted the surprised wizard through the first portal. The Death Eater screamed as he found himself tumbling through a dizzying void before being unceremoniously spat out of the second portal, landing in a heap in the middle of a rubbish bin a few blocks away. The first two Death Eaters, now unarmed, stared in wide-eyed terror. They scrambled for their wands, but Strange was quicker. He snapped his fingers, and ropes of glowing light erupted from the ground, binding them tightly against the nearest lampposts. They struggled, cursing, but the mystic binds held firm. Honestly, Strange muttered, adjusting his tunic. Such theatrics for such meager magical aptitude. Where's the challenge? Just then, a hurried scuffle of footsteps approached. Three figures, moving with practiced stealth, rounded the corner. They were young, barely adults, but their faces were grim, their wands clutched tightly. One, a boy with messy black hair and striking green eyes, stared at Strange with a mixture of suspicion and awe. Another, a tall, ginger-haired boy, gaped openly at the bound Death Eaters and the lingering golden energy. The third, a bushy-haired girl with fiercely intelligent eyes, was already scrutinizing Strange's robes, his cloak, and the residual magical aura with an intensity that bordered on academic hunger. What in Merlin's beard just happened here? Ron Weasley stammered, his eyes wide. Harry Potter, ever the protector, aimed his wand at Strange. Who are you? What have you done to them? Strange raised an eyebrow, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. Relax, Green Eyes. I merely provided a much-needed intervention in a rather one-sided bullying session. And as for who I am, that's a rather complicated question, considering I just arrived from a dimension where your wands would be considered glorified twigs. Hermione Granger, however, ignored the banter. Her gaze was fixed on the golden ropes binding the Death Eaters. That's not a spell I recognize. No incantation, no identifiable wand movement. The energy signature is unlike anything in the Ministry archives, or even ancient runes. She took a tentative step closer, her curiosity overriding her caution. What is that energy? Strange finally turned his full attention to them, a dismissive wave of his hand dispersing the golden binds, allowing the Death Eaters to flee in panicked disarray. It's called the mystic arts, child. A tad more sophisticated than your charming little laser pointers. Laser pointers? Ron bristled, but Hermione hushed him. You're from another dimension? Hermione asked, her voice hushed, eyes wide with genuine intellectual fascination. How did you get here? Why are you here? Strange sighed, running a hand through his perpetually messy dark hair. A dimensional anomaly, an experimental scan, and now, apparently, a rather drab war-torn London. As for why, that remains to be seen. Frankly, I was hoping for something a bit more stimulating. Your brand of magic, while certainly effective in inflicting pain, seems rather rudimentary. Harry narrowed his eyes. Rudimentary? We're in the middle of a war. People are dying. We're fighting Lord Voldemort. The name, spoken with such raw fear and defiance, resonated with a deep, unsettling thrum in Strange's own mind. Voldemort. The malevolence associated with that sound was palpable, almost a physical presence in the air. This wasn't just a street brawl, then. This was a deeper conflict, one steeped in the very fabric of this reality's magic. Strange looked at the determined faces of the three young wizards, then at the lingering scent of dark magic in the air, the boarded-up shops, the oppressive gloom. His earlier ennui, a dull ache, had been momentarily forgotten in the brief skirmish. Now, faced with the scale of their despair, a different feeling began to stir. Not quite excitement, not yet purpose, but a prickling sense of something new. This dimension, with its primitive magic and its Lord Voldemort, might just be more than it seemed. It might be the very challenge he had been yearning for. Voldemort, you say? Strange mused, his gaze distant, analytical. Perhaps this is stimulating after all. Tell me, what kind of individual inspires such potent, dark vibrations? And more importantly, how do I find a decent cup of coffee in this intriguing new locale? Hermione stared at him, bewildered by his audacity, but a spark of something ignited in her eyes, a desire to understand. Harry and Ron exchanged wary glances, clearly unsure whether they'd just met a new ally, a dangerous madman, or both. For Stephen Strange, however, the mundane had suddenly, unexpectedly, become very interesting indeed. He felt a shift, a subtle stirring in his soul. Perhaps, just perhaps, this might be the reality that finally made him care again. The sharp tang of dust and dried blood still clung to Stephen's robes, a visceral reminder of his abrupt arrival. He sat stiffly on a threadbare armchair, the ancient springs groaning a protest under his weight, in what was clearly another dilapidated safe house. Around him, the young trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, eyed him with a mixture of awe, suspicion, and, in Hermione's case, an almost vibrating curiosity. Joining them were a handful of adults, faces grim and weary, a gaunt man with scars, a robust, dark-skinned wizard, and a stern-looking woman whose eyes held a flicker of steel Stephen recognized from seasoned warriors. So, the scarred man, Remus Lupin, began, his voice surprisingly gentle. You claim to be from another dimension? Stephen pinched the bridge of his nose, the headache from the dimensional displacement still throbbing behind his eyes. Less a claim, more an undeniable fact. Unless your local physicists have recently developed interdimensional travel and simply failed to update their public archives. Ron snorted. Physicists? What's he even on about? Hermione shot Ron a look. It's a muggle science, Ron, for studying the fundamental nature of the universe. She turned back to Stephen, her brow furrowed. But you arrived with portals? And that shield spell? It wasn't on any curriculum I've ever seen. My magic operates on principles far exceeding your current understanding, Miss Granger, Stephen replied, a touch of his old arrogance seeping back. Suffice it to say, your curriculum is rather limited. The robust wizard, Kingsley Shacklebolt, interjected, his voice deep and authoritative. Limited or not, your magic saved these three from a Death Eater ambush. We are grateful for that. But we need to understand who you are, and why you're here. Stephen sighed, his hands, still capable of intricate mystical gestures, resting on his knees. As I said, I was conducting a routine dimensional scan. There was an anomaly, a resonance, and then, poof. Here I am. As for who I am Dr. Stephen Strange, Sorcerer Supreme of my reality. Earth's primary magical protector. And frankly, this Wizarding war of yours is a fascinating, if rather provincial, distraction from my primary objective, returning home. His dismissive tone hung heavy in the air. Harry's jaw tightened. A provincial distraction? Our war is costing lives, Dr. Strange. Voldemort isn't just some local thug. Stephen's gaze sharpened. Voldemort. Yes, the one obsessed with, what was it? Immortality through soul fragmentation? Quaint. In my reality, we deal with eldritch entities that devour entire dimensions for breakfast. This, frankly, feels like a particularly nasty squabble in a very large sandbox. Hermione, however, had perked up. Soul fragmentation? You know about Horcruxes? Her voice was breathless with a mix of alarm and intellectual hunger. Stephen quirked an eyebrow. Is that what you call it? A rudimentary, albeit extremely dangerous, method of cheating death by anchoring pieces of one's soul to external objects. Astonishingly primitive, yet profoundly evil. The repercussions on the user's spiritual integrity must be catastrophic. They are, Hermione whispered, a flicker of something akin to fear and fascination in her eyes. It makes him less than human. A monster. Stephen considered her. Indeed. A monster. But one whose magical theory is lacking. The very essence of the soul is a delicate thing. To tear it, to rend it asunder with such crude ritualism, it speaks of desperation, not mastery. The other Order members exchanged uneasy glances. They were clearly out of their depth with his terminology, but Hermione was holding her own. We need to understand them better, Hermione pressed, leaning forward. We've found some, destroyed some, but we don't know how many there are for certain, or if there's a way to counter the magic itself without destroying the object. Stephen paused, a flicker of something almost like interest crossing his face. Ah, now that is a challenge. A puzzle. Very well. He stood, adjusting the cloak of levitation, which seemed to subtly puff out its collar in a show of approval. If I am to be stuck here, I might as well make myself useful while I devise a way back. Consider me, reluctantly consulting. But I will require access to your most obscure tomes, your darkest grimoires, anything pertaining to soul magic, necromancy, spiritual anchors. And a quiet place to work. My patience for primitive magic is limited. We have books, Hermione offered immediately, her eyes bright with a sudden, unexpected alliance. In the Black Library, in my bag, if you think you can help us understand them, truly understand them, we might finally have a chance. Harry looked between them, a hopeful glint in his eyes. Ron just looked bewildered, as if he just witnessed an alien strike up a conversation with a particularly advanced textbook. And so began the most unusual collaboration in the history of two distinct magical dimensions. The attic room of the safe house, usually a dusty storage space, was transformed. Piles of ancient scrolls, leather-bound books, and even a few delicate parchment fragments lay strewn across a cleared table. Hermione, utterly in her element, was meticulously cross-referencing texts, her wand occasionally levitating a particularly heavy tome. Stephen, perched on a stool, conjured a shimmering eldritch light that pulsed softly, illuminating the intricate runes and faded script with an ethereal glow. This concept of Horcruxes is remarkably pedestrian in its ambition, Stephen mused, tracing a finger along a diagram of a shattered soul. Most aspiring dark sorcerers seek to merge with greater entities, or to bind cosmic forces. Voldemort merely seeks to cling to mortal coil through parlor tricks. Hermione looked up, irritation warring with her intellectual curiosity. They're not parlor tricks, Dr. Strange. Each one requires a murder, and they've made him virtually immortal. Immortal by your definition, perhaps, Stephen countered, dismissively waving a hand. A truly immortal being exists beyond the confines of a single physical form, or indeed, a single dimension. Voldemort has merely stapled his existence to a series of enchanted paperweights. A fatal flaw, if you understand the underlying spiritual mechanics. Then explain them, Hermione challenged, her voice tight. Explain the underlying spiritual mechanics that we don't understand. Because what we know isn't enough. Stephen paused, looking at her with a newfound appraisal. She was sharp, even if her magical theory was constrained by this dimension's limitations. Very well. Imagine the soul not as a static entity, but as a vibrational frequency, an energy signature that resonates with the fabric of reality itself. A Horcrux, as you call it, is a violent disruption of that frequency. A fragment, torn off, still vibrates, but out of sync, a distorted echo. He gestured, and faint, shimmering energy patterns, like multicolored smoke, danced in the air, coalescing into a representation of a soul. Then, with a flick of his wrist, one portion splintered off, twisting into a jagged, corrupted shard. Hermione gasped, her eyes wide. It's like a wound. A deep, spiritual wound. Precisely, Stephen said, a rare hint of approval in his tone. And just as a physical wound can fester, a spiritual one can attract undesirable elements. Entities that feed on distortion, on chaos, on suffering. Your Dark Lord may think he's cheating death, but he's merely created spiritual bait, making himself vulnerable to forces even he cannot comprehend. He pointed to a particularly obscure passage in a potion's ingredient list, an ancient, almost forgotten ritualistic use of mandrake root. This, for instance. Your ancestors understood spiritual resonance far better than Voldemort. They knew certain plants could absorb and transmute discordant energies, not just heal a physical body. Hermione's eyes flew back to the text, a sudden spark of understanding igniting in them. Mandrake, in ancient purification rituals. But it's never been connected to Horcruxes before. It's always been about physical ailments, or repelling boggarts. Because you lack the wider cosmological context, Stephen finished for her. Every action, every spell, resonates. If Voldemort's soul fragments are discordant anchors, then perhaps there are echoes, spiritual signatures, he inadvertently left behind, or even absorbed, that could lead us to them. They worked for hours, days blurring into a ceaseless cycle of research and debate. Stephen, initially condescending, found himself surprisingly stimulated by Hermione's rigorous logic and encyclopedic knowledge of wizarding lore. She, in turn, was overwhelmed but utterly captivated by his cosmic perspective, seeing her familiar magical world through an entirely new lens. He showed her how to detect residual energy signatures not just from spellcraft, but from emotional imprints, from the very vibration of a place or an object that had housed a soul fragment. The Ministry of Magic, Hermione mused one evening, pointing to a diagram of the building from an old architectural book. It was heavily occupied by Voldemort's forces. He had a locket, a Horcrux, there for a time. Harry, Ron, and I stole it. And what of its previous history? Stephen inquired, leaning closer. Any grand designs, particularly significant events, or objects of power that were there long before your ministry was built? Hermione bit her lip, racking her brain. Well, the ministry's location in London is quite ancient. It was built over, it's rumored to be where some of the first magical communities settled. There were old wells, and a supposed shrine to a forgotten nature spirit, but that's just folklore. Folklore often contains kernels of truth, Miss Granger, Stephen said, a glint in his eye. He closed his own eyes, stretching his astral senses outward, trying to bridge the gap between their disparate magical systems. A shrine to a forgotten nature spirit, that would imply a powerful, lingering spiritual resonance. A nexus, perhaps. Something that might attract a soul fragment, even if not intentionally placed there. He snapped his eyes open. Voldemort's arrogance would blind him to such subtleties. He would seek grand, significant objects. But what if one of his fragments, perhaps an earlier one, a more potent one, was drawn to a place of inherent spiritual power, rather than one he chose? A place that, to him, would seem utterly insignificant. Hermione looked at the old architectural drawing, then back at Stephen, her face paling. A place of inherent spiritual power, but insignificant to him. A sudden, horrifying thought dawned on her, a realization that made her stomach churn. She snatched an ancient map of London, dating back centuries, unrolling it with trembling hands. Her finger traced a path to the rumored site of the old shrine, now deeply buried beneath the Ministry of Magic. There's a legend, she whispered, her voice barely audible. A very old, very dark legend about a stone of sorrow that supposedly absorbed the despair of generations, buried beneath what is now the Department of Mysteries. A relic nobody could ever find, or even believed truly existed. Stephen's eyes narrowed, a profound sense of gravity settling over him. He felt the echo of spiritual corruption, distant but undeniable, like a cold whisper across the dimensions. A stone of sorrow, absorbing despair, and he placed a Horcrux in a significant object, but what if one of his fragments, imbued with murder and malice, was pulled towards a pre-existing nexus of sorrow? A spiritual amplifier, hidden in plain sight, deep within the heart of his enemy's stronghold, yet unseen by all? He met Hermione's horrified gaze. "Miss Granger, I believe we have just uncovered not only the true nature of one of Voldemort's anchors, but quite possibly the final one. An anchor more potent, more insidious, and infinitely more dangerous than any he explicitly created." The flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows across the ancient runes Hermione had meticulously etched onto the worn floorboards of the dilapidated safe house. Strange sat cross-legged in the center, his posture perfectly still, a stark contrast to the swirling, almost imperceptible energies that began to gather around him. His hands, no longer scarred instruments of a surgeon but conduits of immense power, were held in a complex mudra, thumbs and forefingers touching, creating a circular gateway of his own intent. "Are you sure about this, Stephen?" Hermione's voice was a low murmur, laced with concern. She hovered outside the protective circle, a stack of obscure scrolls and a well-thumbed copy of ancient runes made easy within arm's reach. Probing a mind as fractured and powerful as Voldemort's, it's unprecedented. Even Dumbledore would have hesitated. Strange opened his eyes, their emerald depth seeming to hold not just the candle's reflection, but galaxies. Unprecedented for this dimension, perhaps. But the architecture of consciousness, however warped, remains fundamentally the same across realities. And frankly, Hermione, he added, a hint of his old arrogance returning, Dumbledore didn't have my capabilities. We've analyzed enough of his soul magic, enough of his magical residue. I understand the why of the Horcruxes. Now I need the where, specifically, the one he clearly forgot. Harry stood nearby, wand clutched tight, a silent sentinel. Ron, ever practical, had been tasked with keeping watch outside, his occasional stomps on the floorboards a reassuring, if slightly nerve-wracking, rhythm. "What if he senses you?" Harry asked, his voice tight. "He's shown he can sometimes feel things through his Horcruxes, or through me." "Then I'll be quick," Strange replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. "And I'll have a front-row seat to the most depraved inner monologue since Dormammu complained about his lack of personal space." With that, he closed his eyes again, the last trace of a smile fading into serene concentration. A shimmering, translucent copy of his body began to rise from his physical form, ethereal and incandescent. The cloak of levitation, sensing the impending journey, detached itself from his shoulders and settled over the astral form like a protective sentinel, its collar flaring slightly. "Wish me luck," his disembodied voice echoed, strangely resonant. Then, with a silent, invisible pop, the astral Strange launched himself not outwards, but inwards, piercing the veil of this reality to seek another, darker plane. The transition was like falling through a kaleidoscope of jagged glass shards, each fragment screaming with malevolent intent. Strange had navigated the chaotic cosmic eddies of entire dimensions, but this was different. This wasn't the vast indifference of space, but the intensely personal, concentrated malice of a damaged soul. He found himself adrift in a storm of scarlet and black, a psychic landscape churned by hate and fear. Memories, warped and twisted, swirled past him like venomous phantoms, the terror of an orphanage, the thrill of first murder, the cold calculations of power. Strange, in his astral form, was a mere observer, an uninvited guest. He braced himself, the cloak of levitation rippling around him like an active shield, batting away stray tendrils of despair and rage that threatened to latch onto him. This was Voldemort's mind, a grand, horrifying mausoleum built on the graves of his victims and the fragments of his own soul. Each Horcrux, even those long destroyed, left an echo, a psychic scar that pulsed with a faint, malevolent light. Strange could discern the spectral impression of the locket, the diary, the ring, each a ghostly tether to this warped consciousness. He noted their relative weakness, their anchors diminished by their destruction. He pressed deeper, following the most potent currents of Voldemort's self-obsession. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of ambition and the chill of utter loneliness. He saw glimpses of a gaunt, skeletal figure, a phantom of the man Voldemort truly was, huddled in a corner of his own mind, clutching at the phantom fragments of his ego. Then, he saw it. Not an echo of a powerful magical artifact, not a grandiose symbol of status. It was small, tarnished, almost pitifully mundane. Hidden in a forgotten, dust-choked corner of Voldemort's mindscape, a place where childish memories were suppressed with almost violent contempt, Strange found a faint, persistent hum. It was emanating from a ghostly vision of a grimy, forgotten cupboard in Wool's orphanage. Within it, barely visible, was a small, silver locket. Not the magnificent Slytherin locket, but a plain, cheap thing, crudely engraved with the initial T. It was dented, scratched, and utterly devoid of any outward magical power. Yet, it pulsed with a dull, insistent thrum, a vibration that resonated with a very primal, very old piece of Voldemort's fractured soul. This wasn't an intentional Horcrux. It was a mistake. An accidental, nascent fragment of soul left behind during one of Tom Riddle's earliest, most heinous acts of cruelty. He had likely kept it as a morbid trophy, a memento of a childhood torment, and unknowingly imbued it with a piece of his essence before he ever conceived of the grand ritual of Horcrux creation. He'd discarded it, perhaps, or simply forgotten its existence, too busy with the powerful artifacts and grand schemes. But the soul fragment clung, a tiny, persistent anchor to his deepest, most repressed sense of self, the pathetic, fatherless child from the orphanage. This was the vulnerability. This was the forgotten key. Strange snapped back into his physical form with a sharp gasp, his hands flying to his chest. His body felt heavy, bruised, as if he'd been dragged through jagged rocks. The cloak settled back onto his shoulders with a rustle, a subtle vibration running through its fabric, as if in relief. Hermione was instantly by his side, pressing a mug of steaming tea into his hands. "Stephen, are you all right? You were gone for nearly 20 minutes. He took a long, fortifying swallow, the warmth a welcome counterpoint to the psychic chill clinging to him. 20 minutes of pure existential dread and architectural abhorrence, he muttered, running a hand through his now slightly damp hair. But yes, I found it. Harry leaned forward, eyes wide with anticipation. What? Another locket? Strange nodded. A locket. But not the one you know. A cheap, silver one, engraved with a T. It was in a psychic representation of a cupboard at Wool's orphanage. This isn't a Horcrux he made. It's a Horcrux he forgot he made. Hermione gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. An accidental Horcrux. But oh how? My theory, Strange explained, his voice gaining its usual clinical precision, is that it was created during one of his earliest, most profound acts of malice. Before he understood the full scope of soul magic, before he decided to consciously splinter his soul into grand, powerful artifacts. A fragment just latched onto a trophy, an object of sentimental value from his forgotten childhood. He probably discarded it, or simply thought it insignificant, never realizing it was a powerful anchor to his past self. It's the locket of Tom Riddle, not Lord Voldemort. So it's still out there, Harry said, his jaw tightening. Where could it be? In the psychic projection, it was within the orphanage, Strange clarified. My guess is it's still somewhere within the original Wool's orphanage building, or what remains of it. Probably buried, forgotten, perhaps even repurposed. But its magical signature is unique, a raw, unfocused splinter of soul, not refined by dark ritual. Hermione was already flipping through a thick tome on obscure London history. Wool's orphanage was demolished in the late 60s, replaced by a shopping centre, I think. Or perhaps a housing estate. We'd have to narrow down the exact site. That's where our collaboration comes in, Strange said, looking between them. My senses can pinpoint the resonance, but I'll need your knowledge of this world, and your specific magic, to access it. And then, he paused, his gaze hardening. We need to deal with all of them. The Nagini Horcrux, the one in Harry himself, and then finally, Voldemort. A heavy silence descended. The implications were staggering. The one in Harry. Hermione began hesitantly. A unique case, Strange affirmed. A Horcrux created by accident, without the traditional magical protections. I believe I can sever that connection without harm to Harry, using a focused application of mystic arts combined with a potent disarming charm, provided the primary anchors are already weakened. Hope, tentative but undeniable, sparked in Harry's eyes. So, the plan, Strange continued, standing and beginning to pace, is threefold. First, we identify the exact location of this T-locket. Second, we devise a way to neutralize Nagini, perhaps by separating her from Voldemort, making her vulnerable. And third, a direct confrontation with Voldemort himself, using my abilities to dismantle his remaining spiritual anchors while you, Harry, deliver the finishing blow. It will be a coordinated assault, unprecedented in its scope, blending wizarding resilience with dimensional power. He stopped, looking at each of them in turn, his gaze unwavering. The odds are still abysmal. He is powerful, entrenched, and utterly insane. But now, we have a complete picture. We know his hidden weakness. We know the genesis of his evil. And we have a path to exploit it. A renewed sense of purpose emanated from Strange, banishing the last vestiges of his earlier ennui. This was a challenge worthy of the Sorcerer Supreme, a delicate dance of spiritual and physical combat, a confrontation with a uniquely insidious evil. "All right," Harry said, his voice firm, drawing his wand. "Let's find this locket. And then, let's finish him." Hermione, though pale, nodded resolutely, her eyes burning with intellectual fire and fierce determination. Ron, re-entering the room, picked up on the tension instantly. "Sounds like fun," he muttered, drawing his own wand. Strange met their gazes, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Fun, Weasley, is a relative term. But it will certainly be memorable." He turned to the map of London Hermione had spread on the table, his fingers already tracing lines, searching for a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the fabric of this reality. The final act was upon them. The battle for this dimension, and for the very soul of humanity, was about to begin. The air in the cramped, dusty safe house was thick with tension, buzzing like a snitch trapped in a jar. Stephen Strange, leaning against a crumbling fireplace, observed the frantic preparations. The map of Wizarding Britain, enchanted to pulse faintly where Death Eater activity was highest, had become a morbid constellation. Harry, Ron, and Hermione huddled over it, their faces grim but resolute. "He's distracted, that's our window," Hermione declared, tracing a finger across the map to a cluster of red dots near the Ministry. "Our diversion will pull the main force. The primary Horcruxes are secure and ready for destruction. But the last one, the one Strange uncovered. The Gaunt Shack," Strange finished, a faint tremor in his voice, not of fear, but of profound disgust for the sheer banality of Voldemort's dark ambition. He hid it in plain sight, not in a grand vault, but within the decaying foundations of his ancestral home. A sliver of the original ring, cast off and lodged in the very stones of that hovel, protected by an insidious charm that masks it as residual dark magic from his mother's time, indistinguishable from the ambient despair of the place. Ron shuddered. "That place gives me the creeps." Precisely why he thought it would be overlooked, Hermione muttered, adjusting her glasses. Too squalid, too, beneath him to ever be considered a true anchor. But the true power, the deeper significance, only Strange's unique perception could have discerned. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. While the Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore's army launched a full-scale, highly visible assault on a key Death Eater stronghold, a decoy operation designed to draw Voldemort's attention and fury, the core trio, accompanied by Strange, would target the remaining known Horcruxes. Finally, they would converge on the Gaunt Shack to obliterate the forgotten fragment, leaving Voldemort vulnerable for a final confrontation. "Ready to make a grand exit, Potter?" Strange quipped, his dry tone barely masking the nascent excitement that had begun to simmer in his chest. This was it. The main event. The exhaustion that had plagued him for so long was receding, replaced by the electric surge of impending battle. Harry met Strange's gaze, a spark of defiance in his emerald eyes. "More than ready, Strange. Let's finish this." The diversion was spectacular. Fire rained down on central London, though carefully controlled by the Order's most skilled conjurers, creating an illusion of chaos that drew the Death Eaters like moths to a flame. Distant roars and flashes of sickly green light painted the horizon, a symphony of destruction orchestrated to perfection. Strange, Harry, Ron, and Hermione materialized near the dilapidated gaunt shack, not through the cloak of levitation, but through one of Strange's sling ring portals. The air here was heavy, stagnant with centuries of decay and the lingering echoes of dark magic. Strange felt a prickling sensation on his skin, a psychic residue far more potent than the superficial charms he'd initially dismissed. He was learning. The locket, Hermione whispered, clutching the real Horcrux locket, now pulsating with the malevolent magic Strange had helped them discern. This is where we begin. Strange raised his hands, intricate eldritch runes flaring into existence around his palms. Its defenses are layered. A combination of ancient curses, amplified by the Dark Lord's own soul magic. Pure wizarding spellcraft will struggle to pierce it directly. But I can weaken the spiritual bonds. He focused, his eyes glowing with an inner light, as he projected tendrils of pure arcane energy towards the locket. The air shimmered, and a faint, high-pitched wail seemed to emanate from the artifact, like a distant scream. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shielded their ears, wincing at the spiritual assault. Now, Strange commanded, his voice strained. Ron, the basilisk fang. Hermione, the fiendfire curse, carefully. Ron, with a grunt of determination, plunged the venom-laced fang into the locket. A black, oily substance erupted, accompanied by another ear-splitting shriek. Simultaneously, Hermione, focusing with terrifying precision, conjured a small, controlled swirl of fiendfire, directing it to consume the dying Horcrux. The locket shriveled, disintegrating into fine ash. One down. They moved with ruthless efficiency. The Ravenclaw diadem, retrieved earlier, was next. Strange used a controlled burst of energy to destabilize its magical wards, leaving it vulnerable to Hermione's blasting curse. Then, the cup of Hufflepuff, located in a hidden cave within the shack's dilapidated cellar that Strange's astral form had found, met its end with Harry's Parselton command to destroy. As each Horcrux perished, Strange felt a subtle shift in the magical currents of the dimension. Voldemort's presence, previously a vast, oppressive shadow, seemed to thin, becoming more erratic. The man was undoubtedly feeling the cuts. The final anchor, Strange announced, his voice low. He pointed to a section of the shack's crumbling foundation. Beneath that hearthstone, a splinter of soul, imbued into the very earth Voldemort walked as a child. A connection to his most primal, nascent darkness, before it fully corrupted him. Harry stepped forward, his scar throbbing violently. I can feel it. It's different. Weaker, but more insidious. Strange nodded. It's a foundational piece, a fragment he never recognized as a Horcrux, but rather as an extension of himself. The magic shielding it is woven into the fabric of this reality here. Direct assault might cause an uncontrolled magical implosion. So, how do we get it out? Ron asked, wand gripped tightly. We don't, Strange replied, a grim smile touching his lips. We sever its connection, and then we pull the soul fragment out through the dimension. Hermione, your knowledge of ancient binding runes. Harry, your unique link to Voldemort. We need to create a dimensional fissure, a spiritual vacuum, and draw it out. Hermione's eyes widened. A dimensional? You mean, you want to extract a piece of his soul directly into another reality? Not another reality entirely, Strange corrected. A subdimension, a pocket of pure arcane energy I can stabilize. It will be like a surgical extraction. We pull the malignancy out, and it dissipates harmlessly, leaving the core vulnerability exposed. Working with uncanny synchronization, Hermione began drawing complex, glowing runes in the dust around the hearthstone with her wand, muttering incantations in Latin and an ancient language Strange barely recognized. Strange, meanwhile, wove a complex matrix of eldritch energy, his hands moving with the precision of a master surgeon. Harry placed his hand on the hearthstone, his eyes closed, his scar pulsing with alarming intensity. He was the anchor, the living conduit to Voldemort's soul. A low hum filled the shack, growing in intensity. The air crackled. The very stones around them vibrated. A tear appeared in the fabric of reality above the hearth, shimmering with impossible colors, a tiny, controlled glimpse into the chaotic void between dimensions. From it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper could be heard, a sliver of desperate malevolence attempting to cling to its anchor. "Now, Harry!" Strange roared, his voice amplified by magic. "Pull!" Harry let out a guttural cry, his body arching. A wisp of black smoke, impossibly thin yet radiating pure evil, was slowly, agonizingly, drawn out of the hearthstone, pulled towards the dimensional fissure. It struggled, a desperate, unseen force fighting against oblivion. And then, with a silent pop, it was gone. The fissure snapped shut. The air in the shack seemed to lighten, the oppressive gloom lifting. Voldemort screamed. Not a physical scream, but a psychic shriek that tore through their minds, rattling the very foundations of their sanity. He had felt it. The complete severance of his final anchor. He was truly mortal now. Voldemort appeared in a flash of black robes and furious magic, materializing directly in front of the shack, ignoring the ongoing battle in London. His serpentine face was contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, his red eyes blazing. He looked diminished. His aura, once overwhelming, now flickered like a dying flame. "You, fools," he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. "You dare to meddle with my immortality? You pathetic children. And you." His gaze landed on Strange, his eyes narrowing to slits. "You foreign aberration. You will die 1,000 deaths for this insult." He unleashed a torrent of curses, Avada Kedavras, Cruciatus, and other, darker spells, all aimed at the four figures before him. Strange moved first, throwing up a vast, shimmering shield of the seraphim, the eldritch energy absorbing the impact of the spells, turning the deadly green light into harmless sparks. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood behind him, wands ready. "Still reliant on childish theatrics, Tom?" Strange mocked, a genuine grin spreading across his face. He felt alive, truly alive, for the first time in years. This was a challenge. This was purpose. "Your magic is potent, I grant you that, but it is ultimately limited by your own fear. Fear of death, fear of defeat." "Silence!" Voldemort shrieked, launching himself forward, wand flashing. He moved with a speed that defied human perception, his magic a dark torrent. Strange met him head-on. He didn't rely on a wand. His hands were his weapons, weaving intricate patterns of light and force. He deflected a killing curse with a casual flick of his wrist, sending it harmlessly into the sky. He conjured whips of pure energy that cracked and snapped around Voldemort, forcing him to block and retreat. But Voldemort was still formidable, his power honed by decades of dark practice. He countered Strange's mystic arts with ancient, primal curses, spells that sought to unravel the very fabric of Strange's being, targeting his mind and soul directly. "Your soul magic," Strange grunted, parrying a particularly nasty curse that sought to burrow into his consciousness. "Primitive, but effective in its sheer maliciousness. Good thing I've faced worse." Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't stand idly by. As Strange engaged Voldemort directly, they coordinated their attacks, peppering the Dark Lord with stunning spells, disarming charms, and hexes. Each spell, though weaker than Voldemort's, chipped away at his concentration, forcing him to divide his attention. Voldemort snarled, enraged by their audacity. He blasted Ron aside with a powerful kinetic curse, sending him sprawling. Hermione conjured a massive stone barrier, which Voldemort casually blew apart. His losing focus. Harry yelled, pointing his wand. His weakened. Strange saw it too. Voldemort's movements were becoming desperate, his spells less precise. The years of fragmenting his soul, the constant fear, the recent severing of his anchors, it was all catching up. "Potter!" Strange yelled, seizing an opening. "Remember that shield charm we practiced? The reinforced one. Hit him with it, now." Harry, understanding instantly, focused. He poured every ounce of his will into his wand. Protego Maxima. But this wasn't just a simple shield. As Harry cast the spell, Strange layered his own eldritch energy over it, creating a shimmering, golden dome that pulsed with raw power. Voldemort, caught off guard by the unexpected strength, slammed into it, rebounding violently, his robes tearing. He staggered, his eyes wild. "Impossible. You cannot defeat me. You misunderstand, Tom," Strange said, stepping forward, his cloak of levitation fluttering majestically behind him. "We will defeat you. Not because we are more powerful, but because we are unified. Something you could never comprehend." He extended his hands, and streams of energy, not just golden eldritch light, but also flashes of pure, raw magic that resonated with Harry's own innate power, began to coalesce. Hermione, seeing what Strange was doing, started chanting a powerful banishing charm, channeling her magic through Strange's energy. Ron, recovered, sent a barrage of stunning spells, keeping Voldemort off balance. Voldemort roared, a sound of pure agony and despair, as the combined, synergistic magic slammed into him. It wasn't a single, definitive spell, but a cascading wave of forces, Strange's dimensional energy ripping at his spiritual form, Hermione's ancient binding charms unraveling his dark magic, and Harry's raw, potent wizarding power, fueled by love and sacrifice, shattering his very being. Voldemort convulsed, screaming in a voice that was no longer human, but a chorus of tortured souls. His body began to unravel, not just disintegrating, but dissolving into fine dust, evaporating like a bad dream. The dark mark on his arm, and on the arms of every Death Eater across Britain, faded to nothingness. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. The war was over. Strange stood amidst the four of them, panting, the immense magical exertion leaving him weary but deeply satisfied. He looked at Harry, who collapsed onto his knees, shaking, but with a profound peace settling over his face. He looked at Ron, who was staring at the spot where Voldemort had been, a mixture of awe and disbelief in his eyes. And then he looked at Hermione, who met his gaze with a tired but triumphant smile. "We did it, Stephen," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "We actually did it." Strange nodded, a genuine, warm smile gracing his lips. "Indeed, Hermione. A masterful display of arcane problem-solving and raw, unwavering courage. I must admit, I misjudged you all. Your primitive magic has a certain, visceral beauty to it. And your spirit, your unwavering fight for freedom, is more potent than any spell." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The ennui, the weariness that had weighed him down, was gone. Replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment, and something else, a curiosity. He had witnessed a different kind of magic, battled a different kind of evil, and in doing so, he had rediscovered a part of himself he thought was lost. His purpose was reignited. The dimensional anomaly that had brought him here still existed, a faint hum beneath the surface of this reality. He still needed to find a way home. But as he looked at the newly liberated wizarding world, bathed in the soft glow of dawn, he knew his journey wasn't over. He had saved a world, yes, but he had also found a deeper, more fundamental connection to the very nature of magic itself. The strange resonance that had pulled him here had not just shown him a new universe, but had fundamentally changed him. He now perceived the subtle hum of this dimension in a way he hadn't before, a network of magical ley lines and spiritual currents that whispered of forgotten lore and undiscovered powers. His initial dismissal of this world's magic now felt naive. There was so much more here than met the eye, and he was only just beginning to truly understand its depth.